everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. This is really exciting. Thank you, John, for inviting me. And let's go ahead and get started. So I'll talk about a little bit of what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about who I am and my journey that got me here. We'll talk about the history and philosophy of the Vedas, which is the body of knowledge that Vedic meditation came from. The origins and the practice of this practice of Vedic meditation. How Vedic meditation is different from other types of meditation. I get that question pretty much every time I speak anywhere because there's so many different types out there, and I think people get a little overwhelmed at all the options. The benefits of Vedic meditation. And I'm going to talk about stress because I think most people come to meditation looking for some sort of stress release. And I'll talk about my course in Vedic meditation that I'm actually teaching this weekend in Chicago. I timed it around this talk. So I live in Atlanta and I teach also in Chicago every few months. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what I teach and what the course actually looks like. So my background, I went to medical school at Emory. I actually grew up in Atlanta, went to Northwestern for undergrad. So Chicago was in my heart from an early time. And went to Emory. And then I went to Seattle for my residency in internal medicine. And then I went to Rush. You guys may recognize the large hospital building there. So I worked at Rush for 10 years in their internal medicine department, taking care of hospitalized patients. And then I went to India. I guess in between Rush and India, I learned to meditate in 2011, after a period of profound burnout. Really, really bad. Felt like one little thing would happen against my expectations and I would start crying, or I'd just get up and walk out of my office. None of this was around patients or my students, so don't worry, I kept it together, but it was really not something I could continue to live with, and this practice found me. I wasn't even looking for it, and I was certainly not religious or spiritual, and I was certainly extremely skeptical, but the practice found me, and I took to it very, very quickly, and it was profound and life-changing. And so after about 3 years of practice, decided that I wanted to become a Vedic meditation teacher, and always thought that I would still practice medicine. And then once I did my training, I kind of had this realization that what I really want to do is teach this full time. So I've done a big career change, and I actually teach Vedic meditation full time, and I have programs that I run for patients with stress-related health issues, and I also have programs for wellness for healthcare professionals. So yeah, India for 3 months for my teacher training after 2 years of prep work, and then now I opened my own studio in Atlanta, which is where I live full time, called Conscious Health. And that's kind of my story. Not your typical doctor story, but it's kind of fun. So my experiences with Vedic meditation, I already mentioned before I learned I'm still type A, but I was very, very type A, high achieving, had to control everything. Thought maybe meditation was out there for some type of people, but not something that someone like me could do. And what I noticed when I took the class is that, first off, it was easy to do. The technique is as easy as daydreaming, so it's not the struggle that sometimes people have with other types of meditation. I had actual experiences while I was meditating, so I was like, oh my God, this is real. I'm doing something. Me, the skeptical doctor, I'm actually meditating, and that really helped keep me consistent with the practice, because I felt like I was onto something, and that this was actually a legit thing that I had somehow tapped into. My road rage went away 3 weeks after practicing, no joke, which was huge. And the benefits start right at the beginning, and they continue to build. The practice is 20 minutes twice a day, which seems impossible to someone who doesn't do it until you learn the technique and you can do it like that. So road rage gone. That was good for me and for the citizens of Chicago. Compassion and empathy. So if any of you have experienced burnout, you know that you kind of lose your ability to have compassion for people. And as a physician, that was a pretty tough way to feel, that I just didn't have anything to give. And I forced myself to do the best I could, but very quickly my compassion and empathy came back. My need to control everything also, that one took a little bit longer to go away, but I started to realize that not only is it okay if I can't control things, but things actually usually turn out better than I could have ever imagined if I just surrender and let go. And that's a hard lesson to learn for people who are trained to control a situation. That's kind of what doctors are supposed to do. So that was an unusual, not an expected outcome of this practice. The Jill bubble. So none of us think we're selfish, right? We all think that we're wonderful people and maybe that other people are selfish, but we tend to all see the world from our frame of reference. And, oh, that person gave me that funny look, therefore it must have been something that I did, or that patient, made a comment that was rude, or whatever it is. We all tend to interpret things from our own perspective. And for the first time, I didn't realize it was the first time, but once I actually started to see outside my Jill bubble, it allowed me to relate so much better to others and actually understand more what it's like to be someone else. And again, I didn't think I wasn't doing that, but I came to realize that that had really increased with me. So what are the Vedas? A lot of people get confused about that. What is it? Is it a religion? What is it? So it is a body of knowledge from India. It predates all religion. It actually wasn't written by anybody. It's said to have been cognized by rishis, which is another word for seers. So people who had access to the knowledge, they received inspiration from the universe or from wherever, and they accessed this knowledge. And it was initially an oral tradition that was never written down. So again, no author, predates any religion, but Hinduism and Buddhism do stem from the Vedas. Eventually it did become an oral tradition. It was oral and then it became written down. And now in India, there's 4 main houses of study where Vedic knowledge is propagated. And those are overseen by the Shankaracharya, which is kind of like the Pope of Vedic knowledge. Some things that come from Vedic knowledge that you guys may have heard of. Has anyone here heard of yoga before? It's possible. So yoga is definitely from the Vedas. That's where it comes from. So most people can say, okay, all right, I know what yoga is. Also Ayurveda, which is a holistic form of medicine that's practiced in India and also all over the world, also comes from the Vedas. And I'll talk a little bit about that again in a minute. What's the main philosophy of the Vedas? Basically, and I'm not, the Shankaracharya, so I am not I'm an expert at teaching Vedic meditation. But we're all one thing. We can call it pure consciousness. We can call it whatever we want. But the philosophy is that we are all that exist is one thing, and we are all a part of that one thing. The same way. My toes and my nose and my ears are all a part of me. They don't look the same, but we are all, each of us, and this building and everything, individual expressions of this one thing. And so we are all the same. And there's no reason to see anything as other because we're all the same. And the underlying concept here is love. And it's so great because it embraces all religions or lack of religion, spiritual, non-spiritual, it doesn't matter. We're all one thing. And Vedic meditation and Vedic knowledge serve to try to help people connect to that source. Yoga actually means union, and it's not just supposed to make you have really good abs and strong arms, but it's actually to try to get you to connect with this universality, with this oneness. So the Vedas themselves, this is a picture, a rendering from the Bhagavad Gita, which you guys may have heard about. For me, I was actually a religion major in college, which is funny because I had no intent on ever becoming a meditator or a meditation teacher. But so I'd heard of the Bhagavad Gita before, but I hadn't really heard much else about it. So the Vedas have been divided into 4 main subtypes, I suppose. The Rig Veda, that's the main one. It's the main body of Vedic knowledge. Yajurveda, that discusses more sacrifices and rituals and ceremonies that exist, I think, in all traditions. And the underlying philosophy behind that is what you give, you then receive. Or if you want to receive something, then you must give in order to receive it. So Samaveda, when you listen to the chanting of it, it is supposed to connect you help you detect unity, to connect you with the big self. And I didn't mention this, but here you see self/self. So big capital S self is the universe, and then the little self is the individual outpouching of it. And so we talk about little self, big self sometimes. All right, and then Atharva Veda is kind of the miscellaneous section of the Vedas. Now, all these Vedas have an interface with the practical world that is called an Upaveda. The Upaveda for Rig Veda is Ayurveda. That's what I talked about. That's the holistic health practice, medical practice in India. It means the science of life. Yajurveda is called Dhanurveda, and that's political science or diplomacy. And if that fails, there's actually an art of Vedic warfare, which I have not studied, but it does exist. Samaveda the Upaveda is song and dance, Gandharva Veda. And then there's actually a form of the Vedas that talk about architecture and how to best interact with nature in the structures that we build for ourselves to dwell in. The origins of Vedic meditation. So this gentleman here, that is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Some of you may recognize his picture. The Beatles studied with him in India back in the 60s. I see some smiles and nods. I just love this quote. We have an infinite number of reasons to be happy and a serious responsibility not to be serious. And he said all sorts of wonderful things. You may not know this, but Yoda from Star Wars is based on him because I forget his name, George, whatever. Lucas. He was a meditator. So basically, the mantras themselves, this is a mantra-based technique, they are thousands of years old. So they were not invented by anybody. They were cognized and passed down just like the rest of the Vedic tradition. This technique is for householders. So the title of this talk is a spiritual practice with practical application, something to that effect. This technique is for people who have jobs and lives and spouses and like to eat and have iPhones and go on vacation. The ideal end of this practice isn't to go spend your life in a cave in India and find enlightenment. The idea is to find enlightenment along the way and make your life better as it goes on. So no one's shaming anybody for liking to eat, liking pizza and going to Europe or watching reality TV. It's just how do you make yourself the best version of you? So Maharishi brought this technique to householders. Previously, it was kind of only accessible in India in the mountains, and he figured out a way to bring these mantras and this technique to people in the West. He was a student of Guru Dev. He actually wasn't technically his student because he wasn't in the right caste to be a student of a master like that. Guru Dev his full name is Swami Brahmananda Saraswati. He was the Shankaracharya, that's the Pope that I talked about, the Pope of Vedic knowledge. He was the Shankaracharya back in the 1950s. And so Maharishi actually became his scribe. He wanted to, whatever he could do to be around him, he would do that. And so he learned from him just by being around him and maybe overhearing some of his lectures. Maharishi started the organization called Transcendental Meditation, which is another big question that I get. What's the difference between Vedic and Transcendental? So Maharishi Mahesh Yogi started that organization that has a bunch of different parts to the organization. My teacher, the man who taught me to become a teacher, his name is Tom Knowles, and he studied with Maharishi in India for about 30 years. And was involved in teacher training in India and all over the world with Maharishi. Tom decided to go off on his own and not be part of the TM organization anymore. And so he has started this Vedic meditation. The techniques are quite similar, and all the research that's been done on TM also applies to Vedic meditation, but I'm not actually affiliated with TM. But if you've heard of the technique, or if you've heard of the organization, the technique is the part that we have in common. So the mantra, what is the mantra? We've all heard of, most people have heard of the word mantra, but some people tend to think of Stuart Smalley from Saturday Night Live, the I'm strong enough, I'm good enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And this is not that kind of mantra. It's not that kind of meditation. This mantra is, it's called a bija mantra, which is the word for seed. And basically the mantra, just like a seed contains everything it needs to grow a plant in it, the bija mantra contains everything it needs to have a meditation experience. It is a Sanskrit word, and it is a sound of nature. It actually has no intended meaning. It's an onomatopoetic word or sound, like crash or boom or pop, but in Sanskrit. And the way it works is because it doesn't have meaning, we're not intending anything with it. We're not trying to think it so that we get to a certain goal. It's actually designed to disappear. It works based on its sound, the way the sound resonates in our minds when we think it silently. And that's how it works. The mantra is the only thing about this technique that's just a little bit magical, because there's no way to really describe why it disappears or how it functions the way it does, but we have these mantras and we use them. The rest of the practice is very practical. We'll get to this a little bit later, but anyone can do it. You don't have to have any sort of spiritual beliefs in order to benefit from it. Mantra actually means mind vehicle. Man is mind, tra is vehicle. And so this, I have Lyft up there because it's just like a taxi driver or a Lyft driver. The mantra takes us to this, I'm going to show you a diagram of it in a minute, but the whole point of the mantra is to take us to the source of our thoughts. We don't actually clear our mind of thoughts in Vedic meditation. It takes us to the source of our thoughts, which is also what we call the source of bliss, pure consciousness. Quantum physicists call it the unified field. You may have heard of that. It's all the same thing. It's just what are we calling it? And the mantra is designed to take us there, and then it drops us off and it scoots out and it leaves us there in transcendence. No mantra, no thoughts, and we're transcending. We don't stay there the whole time, and that's something that I get more into in my class, but the mantra doesn't hang out with us while we're meditating the whole time. Its job is to get us to transcendence, activate that layer within us, and then we can bring that out into the world and into our lives and bring that energy and that love and that connectivity. So we don't want our Lyft driver to come with us to the movies because that would be super weird. So the mantra is sort of the same way. So how does the mantra work? If you can imagine this here, like this is, we usually use the metaphor of a swimming pool, but it's pretty hard to project a side view of a swimming pool onto a screen. This glass of water, the top of the surface is us sitting here talking. We're sitting in our chairs. They might be uncomfortable. They might be comfortable. Maybe we're tired. Maybe we just ate dinner. We're sleepy. Maybe we think this talk is interesting. Maybe we're wishing we had stayed home. Whatever it is, we're having surface level thoughts. Maybe we're thinking about our grocery list or what we have to do tomorrow. The bottom here, that is transcendence in this analogy. All this water in here, if you compare this to our minds, this is us being aware of sitting here and listening to me. This here is the source of thoughts. This is where we go and we meditate. All this in between here is filled with thoughts. This is the source of thoughts. So all day long, hundreds of thousands of thoughts are coming up from here. Our mind is filled with them. We cannot clear our mind of thoughts. That's why people have a hard time with meditation sometimes, is because they're like, my mind's too busy. I can't clear my mind of thoughts. What are you talking about? It just makes me more cranky and more feeling bad about myself. So we don't actually clear our mind of thoughts. We transcend them. We kind of circumvent the thoughts. They're all still happening, but we're on the bottom. And there's no thoughts and there's no mantra there. And this is actually something that happens, and it happens on the first or second day of the class, even for people like me. So if I was able to do it, and I'm so in my head, much less now, if I can do it, it is actually humanly possible, I promise. So where are we actually going? I'm going to talk a little bit about the stages of consciousness, because it seems a little bit like, what is this transcendence you're talking about, and how is that a thing? So the first three stages of consciousness are waking, dreaming, and sleeping. Have we all experienced those before? Most likely. They are all interdependent on each other. You can't sleep unless you've been awake. You can't dream unless you're sleeping, et cetera, et cetera. They all also have their own distinct, we call a physiologic signature, meaning your brain waves, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, blood chemicals all look very similar and distinct similar amongst all people, but distinct from each other in these 3 states. The 4th state of consciousness is transcendental consciousness, and that is what we are accessing when we are meditating. This state of consciousness is at the junction between all of the other stages. So between waking and sleeping, sleeping and dreaming, dreaming and waking, we pass through it very quickly. If you guys have ever been falling asleep and you have a muscle twitch, or all of a sudden you wake up and you say, oh, I forgot to pack my toothbrush, that's transcendental consciousness, and you've gotten through that very quickly, and you've gotten inspired by something because it's the source of all knowledge. And what happens is little kids actually are able to access it quite readily, and they're much more connected to it. But once we sleep train them, it is much harder for them. They don't do it on purpose, they just have access to it. Once we sleep train them, which is a normal, good thing to do, we kind of lose access to it. So this technique, this transcendence isn't magic. It's something that we all have within us and something that we've all experienced and passed through thousands of times in our life. What we're doing with Vedic meditation is we're accessing it 20 minutes twice a day. And so we get all those benefits and all the rest and the health benefits and the happy benefits, all that stuff we get so magnified because we're able to access it on a regular basis. Excuse me. All right, before I get into this, the answer to all these questions is going to be no. And I want you to join me, okay? So, do we have to focus or concentrate to practice Vedic meditation? No. Do we have to clear our mind of thoughts to practice Vedic meditation? No. Do we have to sit uncomfortably to practice Vedic meditation? We don't believe in any sort of discomfort or torture in Vedic meditation. You could all be meditating right now in your chairs. All you need is back support, and you need to be comfortable. So none of that. You want your head to be free, but your back supported. So there's none of the like legs crossed, fingers doing something. Those are all valid for other types of meditation, and I'm a pan meditation lover. This is just what Vedic meditation is all about, and I'm the expert in that, so that's why I'm talking about it. I don't want to disparage any other types. Different things work for different people. This worked really, really well for me. Do you have to be vegetarian? No, good. Do you have to be spiritual to practice Vedic meditation? No. Do you have to change your belief system to practice Vedic meditation? No. You actually don't have to have a belief system. I guess that is a belief system in itself, but there doesn't have to be any spiritual component to your life. You could be the staunchest atheist in the world and still totally fall in love with this technique, because when it comes down to it, it's a practical technique. 20 minutes twice a day, live a better life. So how I promised you I would tell you a little bit more about how Vedic is different from other types of meditation. So here we have a cycle, a little circle here. If this is all types of meditation, hop on and hop off at different points in this. The end goal for all of us is bliss. I think we all can agree that bliss is a good thing. If anyone disagrees, speak now. So in a lot of other types of meditation, we start here, and we work and work and work, and we sit up straight, and we concentrate, and we focus, and we change our diet, and we change all these things, and eventually we start to get some benefits. Again, I love all types of meditation, I do promise. And eventually we get the bliss, and we're super excited that we have the bliss. But it takes a lot of work, and if you can get to it in an easier way, why not do that? So in Vedic meditation, we start here. We get the bliss first, and then it sort of bleeds out back into our lives. It's not that it doesn't take time. You're not going to be perfect overnight. It takes, just like other types of meditation, it does, for you to get exactly where you want to go, you never get there, but it's not like in a week you are a totally brand new person, but every time you meditate, you feel this support towards where you're going, and it's not a struggle. Benefits of Vedic meditation. So one of the great things about the TM organization, that's the Transcendental Meditation, that's where Vedic originally came from. Maharishi was actually a scientist, and so he did all sorts of studies on the technique to try to prove to the world how effective it is. So there's a lot of benefits, which is a good thing. And I always hate it when people apologize for a busy slide and then show you a busy slide. But how can I not show you all the benefits of Vedic meditation? So it reduces all these things. Stress, anxiety, depression, insomnia, substance abuse, heart disease, so strokes and congestive heart failure, heart attacks. The risk factors for heart disease are obesity and diabetes, high blood pressure. And also, which I think is really interesting, healthcare costs and utilization. So you have people who are having less stress-related health symptoms. They're not going to the doctor as much. They're not going to the hospital as much. And then it improves all of these things. These come in big blocks because there's a lot of them. Better immune system, better energy. It actually reverses some of the signs of aging, and that usually perks people's ears up. It helps with academics and school behavior in children with learning disabilities and ADD. It helps with well-being and happiness, willpower and memory, staying calm under pressure, creativity, learning ability. The relationships part mostly because you're more self-aware, and then you also become more aware of what it's actually like. You care enough and you're able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. This stuff all happens as an effortless benefit from the practice. So we're not studying how to do all these things. They come as a result of sitting 20 minutes twice a day and doing this technique. Does that make sense? So we're not like reading books and taking classes on staying calm under pressure. That's just what happens after you do this meditation. I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you a little bit about stress and throw in a little bit of physiology here, because I'm a doctor and I love this stuff. And this is actually what sold me on Vedic meditation when I went to I give an intro talk before I teach my class, and that's when people come and hear about what the technique is and why it's so awesome, and decide if they want to sign up for my class to actually learn the technique. And when I went to hear my teacher, my not yet but soon to be teacher, he started talking about stress physiology in a way that I didn't even understand it myself, and I was a practicing physician. And that for me helped legitimize the practice a little bit, because I didn't know anything about what I was about to get myself into. So why meditation works, Vedic meditation works, is because of how it helps us with stress. And I will try to keep this brief. Are there any physiology nerds in the house here? We have one. Okay, I'll keep it brief. One slide. When we get stressed out or when we snap, we're having a fight or flight response. That is our body's evolutionary design to protect us from predators. If a bear is about to bite our cheek off or remove a limb from us, our body snaps into this mode to protect us. So what happens? You guys have all had this happen before. Can you guys all just maybe think back quickly to the last time you lost your temper? Like an hour ago, a day ago, a week ago. It happens to us all the time. So just think about how you felt in that moment as I described this. So our mouth gets dry. We get tunnel vision. We act irrationally. We get superhuman strength. Our blood vessels constrict to prevent, and you want to act irrationally if you're getting attacked by a bear. You want to be able to fight back and have superhuman strength. That's actually adaptive. Blood vessels constrict to protect our vital organs. Our blood gets more acidic so that we're not as tasty to predators. If they take a bite, they may decide like, it's not my thing. I'm going to move on to the next human, and maybe they are less acidic. Our blood gets thicker. We make coagulation factor, so our blood can clot so we don't bleed to death. Our digestion stops, because why digest your favorite paleo, gluten-free, low-carb, pure cane sugar muffin that you got from Starbucks? Why digest that if you're about to die? We want to conserve all of our energy. So, and the other thing that happens is you get the sudden urge to urinate and defecate, and you sweat a lot so that you can be lighter so you can run away. And most people have had some sort of experience with the nervous stomach. When I get stressed, I have to go to the bathroom, something like that. I had one of my, in fourth year of med school, can you just see my moment of, should I say this out loud? This is not a planned part of the talk, but my urology attending, so the senior urology surgeon when I was a medical student, we had this big case planned. This is my last rotation of med school, and he's like, I'm so nervous, I had diarrhea all night last night. So this grown man was telling us that. I just found it hilarious. So anyway, all these things are happening when we have the stress reaction. Super helpful if there's a bear or someone holding you up at gunpoint. Maybe not the acidic, less tasty part, because usually people aren't trying to eat other people, but what happens is this fight or flight response is this binary switch. And when we run out of our ability to adapt to things in our lives, this is called adaptation energy, which I'll talk about in a second. If we run out of that, we're going to have a fight or flight response no matter what is pushing us over the edge. And that could be someone cutting us off in traffic. That could be an email we get from a colleague that doesn't suit us. That could be my patient not being discharged that day, or my resident not doing something that I asked them to do, the fight or flight response. And I wasn't fight or flighting at them, by the way. I was hopefully nice, but that's when I would start crying, like I talked about. So someone stealing your stapler at work is not an adaptive time to have a fight or flight response, but it happens to us. I had one in the Target, the customer service before I started meditating, yelled like a crazy person. So what happens? We act like crazy people, and then first off, the effects of the fight or flight response are lasting on our physiology. So yes, it goes away and our heart stops pounding, but it actually leaves these cellular memories that stay with us for our whole life. And I'm not going to have time to go into all that tonight, but that's something I go into more in my actual course. But then what happens after we start to calm down? About 45 minutes after the fight or flight response. Heart rate slows down. We stop sweating. How do we feel about ourselves? Not super good. There's the guilt and the shame and the worry and the regret and what should I have said differently and what am I going to say next time and why did I do that? I'm a good person. I'm a member at the Theosophical Society and we're all one thing. And I go to these lectures and I'm really a nice person, but I just acted like a crazy person and I hate myself. You can lose hours to days to weeks of your life obsessing. And so that we all heard about present moment awareness. And we've all experienced that this can take us out of we can't focus on our emails because we're so worried about how we've behaved. So ideally, we'd like to avoid those from happening. So let's talk about that adaptation energy. This is from the work of Dr. Hans Selye, which describes a process that already exists that we talk about in our meditation practice. Adaptation energy is our bank account of patience. It's our ability to adapt when something happens that's out of our expectations. What decreases our adaptation energy? Anything that's not the way we wanted it to go. And that's tons of things, kind of all day long, usually. How do we replenish it? We want to get as much rest as possible. That's how we replenish it. So sleep is the main thing. Anything we find to be restorative, working on cars, knitting, gardening, eating well, anything restful and restorative is going to help us with our adaptation energy. So why does meditation work? Particularly Vedic meditation, but all types of meditation. Rest is the basis of activity. If you sleep well, you perform better. If you stayed out late drinking and you go to work or wherever hungover, you are not going to perform better. You're going to not be rested and you're going to be maybe a little bit testy and it's going to be, you're not at your best. So what happens when we're meditating, first off, we are without the devices, which is huge. They drain our energy huge amounts and they're very distracting. But if you can see here, up here is the sympathetic nervous system. This is the fight or flight that I just talked all about. And this guy's ready to run away and fight and he looks horrified. This here is the opposite. This is the parasympathetic nervous system. And this is what we call the rest and digest mode. And this guy, it says peace right there. So this guy is happy, he's sleeping, his immune system's working, his digestion's working, all those things are good. So when we are meditating, we actually are in parasympathetic response. And that is what gives us all of this rest. The more rest you get, the more adaptation energy you have, and the more able you are to deal with all the stuff that life throws at us that we are not expecting. Vedic meditation, one of the studies that they've done that I love to talk about is they did a study where they probed people in all the different body parts, EEG for the brain, EKG for the heart. They drew blood to check stress chemical levels. They put people on a skin resistance test, which is a lie detector test. And that measures if you're stressed. If you get stressed and you start to sweat, that test can measure it. And they actually measured the way our bodies metabolize oxygen. And that's a sign of how much rest we're getting. Typically when we go awake to when we fall asleep, our need for oxygen decreases. That's why our body cools off, our respiratory rate drops. Vedic meditation compared with sleep, which is already decreased, 2 to 5 times more rest than any point in a night's sleep. So you're getting heaps and heaps of rest, which gives you all this adaptation energy, and that's why we like it so much. So it improves our performance. It allows us to interact with the world in a way that's productive rather than us turning into crazy people who yell. I'm going to go through a couple, very quickly, a couple journal articles, medical studies that I thought were illustrative of the benefits of Vedic meditation. This one is about burnout. And this is for employees who worked at a school for children with behavioral problems. So that kind of was the closest thing. They didn't study for hospitalists, which is the type of medicine that I practice. But working at a school for people with behavioral problems, that tend to be a lot of what we dealt with. And it was, whether it was us or our patients or our students, everyone's misbehaving. And so it's a pretty good parallel. And what they showed is that, without boring you with all the numbers and the statistics, decreased stress, burnout, and depression. Those were all statistically significant findings. And then they did subgroup analysis, which is always tough because that's less people. And so sometimes the numbers aren't able to be significant. But within the burnout category, they measured emotional exhaustion. That was improved significantly. The decrease in sense of depersonalization trended towards. So statistical significance means like the number game matches and it's not due to chance. So that's what I mean when I say that. So it trended towards it not being to chance, and then an increase in personal achievement. So these are people who were taught the TM technique versus they actually just put on a wait list for it. You can't do a placebo-controlled trial with this type of meditation, not really possible. This is another one that's a little bit more medical, and this is a study of 201 Black patients with known coronary artery disease, and they were randomized for health education versus learning to meditate. 48% reduction in all-cause mortality, including heart attack and stroke. So very, very beneficial. The results were even better for people the more consistent they were with the practice. And the average follow-up was about 5 years for this study, so it was, people really stuck with it. I'm going to shift gears and talk a little bit about the actual Vedic meditation course, how we teach this to lovely people who are looking for better lives. The class is taught over 4 days in a row, 90 minutes each day. So boom, 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 hour and a half each day. On the first day, I do a ceremony called puja, which is an Indian ceremony that they do for births and deaths and weddings, and it's a ceremony that's done all the time for religious and non-religious events. And this is a picture of the aftermath. This is what a hard day's work looks like for me. People bring in fruit and flowers. It's a gratitude ceremony for the teachers who come before me. There is a picture of Guru Dev. That's the teacher who was the Shankaracharya that taught Maharishi. And we basically do this ceremony to honor the teachers who have come before us. And we offer our students bring in fresh fruit and fresh flowers. That's traditionally what is done in these ceremonies, what was done back in the Himalayas back in the 1950s. I always say that if you like ceremonies, you'll love this one because I sing in Sanskrit and there's flowers and there's incense. Bless you. If you don't like ceremonies, you'll love this one because it's super short and you don't have to do anything. So if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, that's cool. I'm doing the whole thing and you don't actually have to participate at all. Just stand there and watch. So day one of the course, each student gets a mantra, and that's part of a very big part of my training is I can determine who gets which mantra. There are not 6 billion of them, so there isn't one for every single human being, but there are ways for me to determine who gets the mantra, such as stage in life, some of the biopsychosocial characteristics of the person. And so that's how I determine it. And each student gets their mantra on the first day of the class and then end up in that first day doing a 15-minute meditation. As the rest of the class goes on, basically people go home and they practice, and then they come back for days 2, and then they go home and practice and come back for day 3, etc. On those days, we talk about the mechanics of transcending. We talk about how to actually do the practice, the technique itself. the nuts and bolts of how to fit it into your life and the way to get the best benefit from the practice. And we talk about stress, much more detail about stress than I just talked about. Stress's effect on the physiology and how Vedic meditation actually reverses that damage. It's not just a Band-Aid, it actually reverses damage done from stress and makes us healthier. And by the end of the course, you're a self-sufficient meditator. So you don't need apps, you don't need guided visualizations. You are your own meditation sanctuary, and you can meditate anywhere. You could meditate right here while I was talking if you wanted to, and I would give you 2 thumbs up. You can meditate. I've meditated at music festivals, on airplanes. You don't need crystals and soundproof headphones and, padded walls and feathers and unicorns to meditate. You take it with you as long as your back is supported. So that's one of the things I love about it too. It's very portable and very low maintenance. Follow-up and support. So the course is designed, the course fee is typically about a week's salary, which is a big investment, and people, it's designed to be a little bit of a leap for people and to make people think twice, do I really want to do this? What do you get for this price? So you get the class, and then there is extensive follow-up support and community. So once you take the class the first time, you have access to take the class again for free for the end of time. Group meditations, I don't host them here, but in Atlanta I host group meditations twice a month that my students are all invited to. I do extensive email follow-up and support, particularly the first few months after people learn. And then you have access to me as your teacher forever, email, phone, and then I do a 45-minute one-on-one session with my students about 2 weeks after they finish the course to kind of just check in and make sure they're getting some TLC. The technique, you don't ever have to see me again. If you don't ever want to, you have all you need at the end of the class, and bye-bye. But the greatest thing about it is that you have a live human being who is a trained expert in this. I've studied for years to do this and have been teaching it for years and practicing it for even longer. And you don't get that with apps, and you don't get that with a guided meditation class that you go to at a gym. And those are also great, and they're a nice way to start. And sometimes for people, that's all they need. But for people who are looking for a little bit more of a program and some guidance and mentorship, that's where we come in. One of the coolest things also is that once you learn from one teacher of Vedic meditation, you have access to all the Vedic meditation teachers all over the world. And there are a couple who teach here in Chicago full-time as well. I teach here about every 3 months or so. So you can go to their classes and you just say, hey, I learned with Jill, not you or whoever. I learned with Jill, and they let you sit in on their classes for free and come to their group meditation. So it's about community and it's about support, because the only catch to all of this is that you have to do the practice. And so if you don't actually if you're not consistent, then you've spent some time in a class and hopefully enjoyed it, but that doesn't make anyone's lives better. So we like our students to continue.
So did you ever consider doing it via the internet?
Meditation?
No, the actual class.
Oh, that's a great question. It's really designed to be done in person, and you lose a lot. You can't do the ceremony. That definitely has to be done in person, and you lose a lot of the connection to the student. So I think it's tempting to do, but I think there's a lot lost in translation when it's not done person to person. The follow-ups you can do over the internet, the one-on-one session, because I'm not going to be in Chicago for those, but my students who are here, I teach in Minneapolis as well, so I do my one-on-one sessions over Skype usually.
Hi, thank you for your lecture.
You're welcome.
When you receive a mantra, is it your mantra for life? Because you said that you give the mantra based on their place in life. Mm-hmm. So, people change. So do the mantras change in time at all?
The mantra itself doesn't. It basically, if you think about, if you and your friend both bought the same pair of shoes and they're a size 8 shoe, you both loved them so much, you got the same pair. And then 2 weeks later, your friend invites you over to their house for dinner, and you wear those shoes. And as you're leaving, by accident, you put their shoes on. Because everyone in Chicago, we all take our shoes off when we come in. That's just something I learned here. We don't do that in Atlanta as much. You put your shoes on, and you by accident step into their shoes. And they don't feel right on your feet because they weren't yours. Your friend has been wearing them. So they started off the same, but they become integrated into who you are. Not into who you are, but into your brain. And you kind of just get acclimated. The mantra gets acclimated to the way your brain works. So it kind of grows with you over time. There are advanced techniques that you can get after you've been meditating for a year consistently that can kind of help to change your meditation experience a little bit and bring some of the, designed to kind of bring some more of the transcendence out into your life a little bit faster. But you don't actually ever need a new mantra. You can stay with the same one for the rest of time. So it doesn't need, you can get upgraded ones, but I've had a couple people say, I don't like my mantra. It reminds me of my friend's name who I had a fight with when I was in 6th grade. And every time I meditate, I think of her. And the mantra is yours. It's not like, I didn't pick it. It's the mantra that you're supposed to have. And so I have to talk through people. It's actually really cool that it's bringing this issue up because it's actually releasing that stress from your body, and then you'll kind of get over that issue. So everything happens for a reason. A lot of times people think that they can pick it, but it's not. Did that answer your question?
The little that I know about Ayurveda, I know a lot about it sort of going with the seasons and the different sort of themes in nature and things that are happening around us during a certain season. Does Vedic meditation have anything to do with that, with season change?
It is, so that's a great question. Everything, as I mentioned, all the Vedic knowledge is designed to bring you back, to connect you with the capital S self, or the big self. And so Ayurveda is almost like meditation for the body. Vedic meditation affects the mind and the body, both of them, but Ayurveda is about returning, and I'm not an expert in Ayurveda, so if I misspeak, I apologize, but it's about returning us to the way nature intended for our body to work. We have electricity now, we stay up late, we look at devices, we eat food that's flown from Guatemala and from, all these things that aren't grown seasonally, and it throws our body out of balance, and the idea is to return us to the balance that our body does, so that we're in touch with nature, and nature is this consciousness. It's another way of thinking of pure consciousness. And so the meditation, when we transcend, we are also getting in touch with nature that way. So they're related. They're not the exact same thing, but they're very closely related. They're sister practices, sister sciences. And Ayurveda is huge in the Vedic meditation community. Not everyone that practices Vedic meditation. I mean, you can eat cheeseburgers for the rest of your life and no one's ever going to tell you what to eat. But particularly amongst the people who get really, really into it and become teachers, there's a lot of people who are very knowledgeable about Ayurveda. Did that answer your question? Great.
Can you mix this with other practices, like a Zen meditation with that?
Great question. So we are firm believers that all meditation, and by we I mean the Vedic meditation community, all meditation is good meditation. So I'm never going to ask you to stop doing a practice that works for you or that you like or that you're enjoying. What we do ask is that when you're practicing your Vedic meditation for 20 minutes, that you stick to Vedic for those 20 minutes. And then when you're done, do whatever other type of meditation, or before you start your Vedic, do what other type of meditation. So whatever you want to do is fine, but the Vedic meditation practice itself works much better if you keep it to what it is, because a lot of the other types of meditation do require focus and concentration, and that will derail your Vedic practice because we focus on being effortless. And so there's room for all of it, but not at the exact same moment.
I was just curious, being a doctor, and is a lot of your work now on teaching meditation? You mentioned working with other medical professionals. Mm-hmm. I'm just sort of curious if you could elaborate a little bit, because it's from my, at this point in life, this is like a path for health and well-being, going forward, and it's really interesting to see yourself as an MD embracing this and benefiting from it, and bringing that sort of scientific mentality because to me this is also science, but there's been this divide, and it brings me so much joy to see the gap is being bridged. And I don't know, I partly just want to say thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
And also if there's anything you do have to say about that, your experience in working, like I say, especially with medical professionals, because it's just such a needed practice?
Absolutely. Thank you for your kind words and your great question. I think our whole healthcare system is very stressed. I think the patients are stressed, the doctors are stressed, the administrators are stressed, the nurses, everyone in there is stressed, and the system itself, insurance system, obviously is stressed as well. And so I think people get a bad name. Doctors get a bad name for not listening or for not caring or for being cold or not being able to give answers, and that is actually not part of physician training to know all the answers and to be able to do all the holistic stuff. We're not trained that, but patients come and they say, hey, we want you to be able to fix everything, and we want you to do it with a pill and with a test and a diagnosis, and I want to be all better. And so I think that creates a lot of tension between doctors and the people that they're trying to help. And the more stress there is, the more everyone feels it, and it kind of goes off the rails there. So I think my goal is to, from a place of some legitimacy or street cred, I practiced medicine for 10 years after my training was completed. A friend of mine in Atlanta says she does energy healing, which is way in the other end of the spectrum of Western medicine. And she said, she sort of joked that I have one leg in each side, and I'm kind of this bridge that can bring people from the woo-woo side who totally distrust their doctors and think Western medicine is horrible. I can understand their perspective, and I can understand the doctor perspective and the healthcare professional perspective of we're doing what we're trained to do, and we're trying to help people, and that other stuff we're not taught about. And so no one teaches, there's not like a full course. Maybe there are some electives now, but we're not trained to be experts in all that, all the holistic alternative type practices. So my hope is that by teaching doctors and other healthcare professionals and by teaching patients as well, I can improve the communication and maybe convince some people who would be otherwise skeptical of meditation to do it, because I have a medical background and it's something that I do myself. I'm not just like, oh yeah, go, as I'm eating my cheeseburger saying don't eat fatty foods. You know, I actually do what I'm recommending. So I think that's a big part of it. And the doctors are, I think, in general known to be the toughest patients, and are starting to recognize, doing a really good job recognizing when someone's health issues are stress related. And then again, we don't get the training. We say, okay, maybe you should try yoga or meditation, or you should go see a therapist, or take this pill or whatever. But they're not trained, so they shouldn't be expected to be able to have this whole conversation about what type of meditation they should do or what kind of yoga. But it tends to still be, I'm the doctor, you have a stress-related issue, and you can try meditation. But the doctors themselves, God bless them, because I am one, and I was the same way. This is really just at 6 years since I learned. We don't want to necessarily take our own advice sometimes. And so I think getting the doctors to understand the benefits of a program like this rather than a 1-hour wellness session is, that's why I have my medical training, is so I can bring this knowledge to people in the medical world.
So for Vedic meditation, you had mentioned mantras.
Yes.
So is it required to have a mantra if we do Vedic meditation? If so, how can we find one for ourselves, if that is even possible?
It is a requirement, and the way you get it is from your teacher, by taking the class. You can Google mantras if you want to, but you won't know how to pronounce it and you won't know how to use it. And because it works based on its sound vibration, the pronunciation is really important, and as well as the technique of using it. So it is a necessary part. You can't really practice Vedic meditation without it, but you can't also necessarily find it on your own and figure out how to do it. You can try, but it will probably be very difficult to do it without a teacher.